I don't even know
just
which
like
one's better. They both just
they're
they're
both
so stupid.
they're both so
Not like
stupid.
that's not like a comment on the situation. Just like he looks so stupid
I
in both
know, that's why I'm
situations.
laughing. Like it's just like, oh yeah, but then like no one's commenting on the fact that that Reid looks so ridiculous right now. Like I don't know. I don't
He
know
must have just
why.
looked like fucking sleeping beauty or
Just
something.
I kind of imagine like fairy dust just kind of
Yeah,
sparkling around him and he's got like rosy cheeks and he's just so helpless.
little like
Helpless
a
boy.
veil of roses, and he's
Yeah.
holding flowers.
Yeah. Or like little birds are like holding him up by his clothes.
Oh God. Welcome back. We are in bed with books, and this week we'll be talking about the third book in the Serpent and Dove series, Gods and Monsters. My name is Melissa.
And I'm Bethany. And I just want to do, before we get started on this glorious third book of this glorious trilogy, I want to do a call out to my husband, Milo Mullins, who composed and recorded the intro and outro music to our podcast. So,
We owe him our firstborns, which makes a lot more
yes,
sense for you than it does for
yeah,
me.
if we had any firstborns.
But you've got your
Um,
cats.
Cats. If anyone needs podcast music, just hit us up. He's got it. So Gods and Monsters. We literally had a week to read it. We just got finished with Blood and Honey. We're hoping for a little bit of uplift.
I think it was. I think it
It
was.
definitely was. It was
Yeah.
so good. I read it so fast. I just loved it so much. So much happened. So much
Yeah.
happened. Like, I felt like the beginning of it, like, I would say the first third of it was like its own ending.
Yeah.
And then there was like another kind of ending. And then the ending. It was just like this succession of
Yeah.
everyone coming home with things, you know?
In a good way too. It's not like Lord of the Rings where there's
Yeah,
like seven
exactly.
fade outs.
Yeah.
It was like a succinct story. And
Yes.
then like each of them were satisfying, which was nice.
Honestly, it could have been like another 3 books.
Yeah, kind of the biggest difference between like this one and the previous books was that the previous books were so structured around like a very specific plot point,
Mm-hmm.
whereas this one had multiple plans that went through. Whereas like Blood and Honey, the one plan was to get allies to try to defeat Morgaine at the funeral. Whereas this one, we kind of had a plan at the beginning, and then that fell through, and then there was a second whole set of things that happened, which led into like a kind of half three, which eventually led into what ends up happening.
Right. And which I'll say this, I won't say it was like a super strong plot, like it was just kind of like fumbling. Like it just reminds me of like it was like when they go to the Low Melancholique and meet Coco's mom. And she's like, "Go get the ring and bring it back." Like it was just kind of
Yeah.
like, "Go
was
fetch
very
me like something."
Fairy tale.
Yeah, it was very, and that's very, very common, like trope or whatever plot like device. It just reminded me of like, I don't know if anyone out there plays Skyrim, but you know what I'm talking about. When every quest is go get me this sword out of the cave, and every
Yeah.
cave is the same, and you're just kind of like, after a while, you're just like, oh, don't get me wrong, I fucking love that game, and I play it every year, but
And this book.
it gets kind of. So it just kind of felt like, oh, like, go get this. Okay, whatever. We'll get into it. But
Well, it's also
you were
just that
saying,
like this book is much more character driven than
Yeah.
plot driven. It was stronger because of that. Because when you have like this
Yeah.
very drawn out plot, like in Blood and Honey,
mhm.
where there's like a defined bit to this one quest that they're on, you have to fit a lot of like character
Yeah.
shit into it. Whereas
And it doesn't always feel like grounded. And
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree, because like getting the ring wasn't like a big thing. It didn't
Yeah.
feel like it because you had a lot going on with like
Yeah, like
characters.
the character interactions within that whole sequence
Hmm.
were far more important than just getting the ring.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Other first thoughts though, same. I also read this. This is probably one of the faster reads that I've had in a while.
Hmm.
Not just because we knew that we wanted to record this soon, but
Hmm.
because I couldn't put it down.
Hmm.
I think I read the second two parts, like the second half of the book in one sitting.
Hmm.
Because after Reid's whole situation, I couldn't, I had to put it down for a couple of days. I was like, this is
No.
too much.
Yeah, so we leave off with blood and honey. Lou's literally possessed, and we don't even know exactly how or who or why or what. Like, we just know it's Lavoisin and Nicolina do it. And it
Yeah,
isn't
like very,
until,
very minimal details.
yeah, and it isn't until you open up Gods and Monsters that there's a Nicolina chapter. And you're like,
Hmm.
okay. So they're kind of fumbling around on the outskirts of the city because they can't go. It's like burning.
Yeah.
And they're like starving and stuff. And they have Reid kind of mistake Lou's weirdness for grieving Ansel.
Hmm.
And I love that part where Coco's like, is she pregnant? And I
Yeah.
fucking loved that Reid was like, no, her cycle was 2 weeks ago. I love that he knew when she bled. That's just so
Yeah.
cute.
Well, he also like on a few occasions up until we find out, like, well, up until they find out what's happened, where he very clearly knows that it's not her, but he can't put it into words. Like it's some
Hmm.
kind of like magic sixth sense. And so his
Yeah.
brain is telling him and his gut is telling him something different. And
Yeah,
he
no,
doesn't,
he definitely knows she's not herself,
yeah.
but not in like a, oh, she's just grieving kind of way. Everyone's grieving,
Yeah.
but she's still like the odd one out. She's being
Yeah.
fucking weird.
There's this exchange that they have where I'm just gonna call her Nicolina. Nicolina and him are laying together and
On the pew.
yeah, it's on the pew
Hmm.
because she says something along the lines of like, well, not everyone has to die, Reid. And he says like he closed his eyes and he imagined that it was a different Lou that was laying on him and talking to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was really sad because he's like, then I opened my eyes and the spell was broken. And I'm like, oh, poor man.
Yeah.
Poor man. It's not his wife.
My wife. Aw. Yeah. But you kind of, root around with them for a minute. You meet, like, Father Achille. But then it, like, shit doesn't really start to go down until you get to the lighthouse.
Yeah.
And the lighthouse, that was super, like, creepy and cool. I was really into
was.
it.
At that point, I was like, Nicolina's not even trying to hide anymore, though,
I
because
know.
she's like, is that what you're afraid of? Decapitation? And I'm like, Lou would never ask that. Are you even trying to hide yourself? We also see, so kind of, I guess, kind of leading up to this, we see how much Reid is using magic now. And so he's moved past all of the stuff in the second book. I don't really think we need to, like, break down why that might have happened because it could have happened for any number of reasons. I kind of like that we just get him using magic in in the next book. We don't have to deal with that
Yeah.
all over again. But we also see, because previously Lou has been the driving force in why these people are all together.
Right.
And I guess in maybe a darker way she still is, but they're working together in a much different way. They're not working together in spite of themselves. They're working together because they want to now.
Yeah, there's that. So the lighthouse. So they walk in, and there was this. It was just such a like I felt like I was in a movie because there was that point where like the door slammed and everyone freaked out, and I was like, I freaked out. I was like, oh my god, that happened, and then Reid has to like walk over, open it, and be like, everything's fine, like he's like the dad.
I mean, he's definitely scared too, but he's like,
He knows he has to be like the man.
see, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah. He's convincing himself. Yeah. There's this really great line though that I liked, where we'll just call her Nicolina. What did we call it? What did we call her in our like
Nicolina Lou.
Nicolina Lou, which we can't say with a straight face.
No.
So they're walking through the lighthouse, Nicolina and Reid, and she says, "Can you scent it? It coats the ropes, paints the glass. The entire room is slick with it." And Reid's like, "I don't scent anything." And she says, "Perhaps it's your fear I smell then, not the Kashimar or whatever." So they know that the Kashimar's coming. They know that the Kashimar's there, and they have this idea from like lore or whatever that it creates your greatest fear or whatever. It's kind of like, it reminded me of that Harry Potter thing. What is that?
Bogart.
Yeah, it's like a boggart. And so they're preparing to be scared. And
Which
I
is
just
just
like,
making them all so much more tense.
no, it's
Like
really
Bo was
funny.
like, just for other purposes,
Yeah.
can everyone tell me right now that they won't ever forget about me?
Yeah.
Poor baby.
Did you relate with that?
Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
did. I think I did. I liked Bo a lot more in this book though.
Yeah, I love
Not that I
Bo.
didn't like him before. I enjoyed him before too, but like a lot more.
It was more enjoyable what they put him through.
Yeah. He's been properly hazed now.
Yeah.
So
So now he has to be redeemed.
yeah.
But yeah, like, I don't know why I like dog-eared that page like you do in a Kindle. Later it comes up when they're at the stake. And Reid says, like, they coated the ropes. Like, it was just such a, the imagery around it. There was just so many, like, symbolic, like, little nest eggs that she, like, put everywhere that just, like, made you feel so, like, succinct with what was going on. It just felt so connected.
It felt kind of like almost like Pavlovian because it was like it evoked fear the first time and then it kind of draws that out again.
Yeah, because it's like there's this like coming back to the same things. Like, for example, after the Kashimar, Reid freaks out because it's Theory, and Theory will know that it's Nicolina, not Lou. And so she runs off. And then Theory's like, catch her. And then Reid's like running like down the stairs or whatever. And he just has this moment where he's like, I don't know why, but I just had to catch her.
Yeah.
And then there's the I'll find you later in the middle of the book. And then towards the end of the book, he says it again, like, I'll find you again, Lou. And then he remembers, right? There's a lot of like these reminders that things have meaning, where in the last book, everything felt very chaotic and not like it had a purpose for like the greater good. I feel like this was like riddled in like all of these like little like signs of hope.
Yes. I mean, first of all, I do want to go back to hope because I feel like fear and hope are kind of this like metronome that the whole plot, the whole book bounces on back and forth. But so in Blood and Honey, they were constantly like 3 steps behind Morgaine, even when they thought they were ahead of her. She was constantly like catching them, knowing what they were going to do, tricking them in a way that she knew would trick them. But in this book, there's also the sense that they have more power than they did previously. Because they do. The tables have turned in their favor, and they still have to prove themselves a couple of times, like the ring, low melancholy, when you have to drink from it and everything. So they're still proving themselves, but they're not playing at a handicap like they were before. And I think that's why this book feels more hopeful than the last one did. Like the last one, we were begging for it. This time it was constantly given to us.
Yeah. It delivered.
Yes.
And yeah, there's that. He chases her down and he's like pinning her on the ground. And it was right when they realized that it was Nicolina, right? Is that when Coco cries and makes the
Coco's
scar?
got the locket because Celie like stole a bunch of stuff from her family's safe.
Right.
And so the locket has a mirror that only shows the truth because it's got like Angelica's tears or something, which I mean, I can't believe that I didn't realize that Angelica was going to be Coco's mom.
Right.
Because her tears started a fire.
Yeah.
Tears. Okay. But they hold up the mirror after they catch Lou and they see Nicolina in it. And that's how they know.
Yeah. But then she cries, Coco, the scar. I'm trying to get, is that moment?
Yeah, so they have to like knock Lou out and they're trying to figure out what their next step is going to be.
Yeah.
And that's when that's when Reid has the line where he starts that whole trail, that other connecting thread, which is
Yes.
hope isn't the sickness, it's the cure.
Yes. Yes, and Coco sheds tears, and it's that line, it's the reminder that it's hope that
Hmm.
makes Coco's tears not burn but
Yeah.
heal. And it turns Lou's scar into like a rose with thorns.
Yeah. I like that detail because we're kind of also getting the, I guess, like the foreshadowing for later because the eternal flames, the eternal fire that's happening, that black fire in Cesarine was because of her tears of grief over Ansel. And so later, when coming to terms with the fact that she loves Bo is what
Mm-hmm.
brings the fire or brings the storm that clears out the fire. And so like I guess the notion that tears aren't always sad.
Yes, they're healing.
They're healing. Exactly, exactly.
Mm. I didn't pick up on that. That's good.
I'm gonna write
Good
that one
one.
down.
Good one, Melissa. Put that on your list of things you did well today.
Thank you. It's a very long list.
So they realize Lou is Nicolina.
And that's like the turning point.
Yeah.
So
Like that changes the plot.
yes, exactly. Because what we thought was going to be the plan is no longer the plan because they have to fix this issue. And I think this is the point when it definitely shifts towards that more character driven.
Yeah,
Because even they don't really have a clue what they're doing at first.
Yeah.
But now they like very firmly know. And the plan isn't we need to go to Low Melancholique. The plan is we need to save Lou,
Yeah.
so we're going here.
Yeah, exactly. It makes a lot more sense. So they get there and it's kind of a this is when you start going into different universes. You start descending. It's like Inception. That's what it felt like to me. Oh my gosh. So this part was like when specifically Lou, I don't think we see anyone else go. Like we don't really see I don't know. I can't remember.
Go where?
Like what they saw in the water or what they saw when they drank it.
I think we see something from Reid,
Yeah.
but we definitely don't see Coco's.
But what stuck with me was what Lou saw. So this okay. So throughout this though, we do get little snippets of chapters from Lou, which
Yeah.
are her like in nothingness and like Nicolina's consciousness. And there's this like it's called Legion.
And
And
so
it's
they
like
named themselves.
they've
They're
named
even like they're like we don't really call ourselves that. We just tell the new people that.
yeah. And it's just like all of these like mice, this kind of like figurative rat's nest or something, but like
The souls of everyone else she's stolen.
yes, and she sees Etienne. So there you go. You know, like obviously we know that we know like Lavoisin and Nicolina and Morgan were all part of that. But here is like viable proof that Nicolina is responsible for that little mishap.
Yes, and that it goes back farther than we thought it did. Because I think kind of at the end of book 2, there's this sense that like maybe they just started working with Morgaine, like they've switched sides because they don't think that she can do it. But then we just have like irrefutable proof that Boisson's been helping her from the start.
Right. Yes. And I feel like this was really important because you had like help me come up with words for like what Legion is. It's like this I want to say like
Hive mind.
swarm hive. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know me. You know what I mean.
We've only had several classes together.
And several episodes.
Yes.
Legion is like this hive-minded thing that like once you're in it, like once you get sucked in, like you lose your sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lou desperately doesn't want to lose herself and doesn't want to get stuck. And so she's repeating the names of the ragtag team of like, what does she say? Reid, Coco, Bo, Ansel, Madame LaBelle, like over and over and over again to like remember who she is. And I feel like this is really important because we know since book 1, Lou has been very much surviving running, escaping, thieving, lying, you know, and she's never accepted life for herself, really. She's just been running. She has not been living. That comes full circle here. And it begins with Etienne. It begins with her getting sucked into Nicolina's consciousness and wanting to distinguish herself from the hive. And so it's important that she's calling out the names of the people that she loves, because that is life. That is living, is the people that you love, your connection to other people. And so there's this passage that I wrote down. Oh, here it is. So Lou has to constantly remind Etienne what his name is, because he's forgetting his name, because he's been there a little bit longer than Lou. And it says, he's forgotten his own name again, so I remind him. I will keep reminding him. Reid, Coco, Beau, Ansel, Madame Labelle. It's Etienne. You are Etienne. And I feel like this is like important to her, because, and this is what I'm talking about in the last episode, was there's that moment on the rooftop where we're just kind of like, it's supposed to be like this like breakthrough of hers, but it didn't feel like it. This is what I'm talking about, though, is this is the breakthrough. She needed to fight for Etienne. Yeah. And it was this symbol of fighting for herself, for fighting for life.
Yeah, because at that time, like in that moment, in that chapter, fighting for Etienne is equivalent to fighting for herself, because even though she hasn't been fully absorbed by Legion just yet, she also acknowledges that her mind is still in there. They still have complete access to it. So like when Etienne gave his name, he had very few memories, but they pulled the rest from her memories. Yeah. Which means Etienne was nearly gone. Yeah. And so she could save him. She could save herself. So one of the issues that we had, I guess not issues, but questions we had in the recent In Blood and Honey was whether it was the white threads that were corrupting her, or if it was Morgaine, or like how that was happening.
Yeah, we were under the impression that something magical was happening to influence her. We were pretty positive about it. We were like, something's going on.
I'm still kind of on that track, but like different now. So hear me out. So when she was seeing the white threads, there's no reason that she should have seen them at that point, because her mother Morgaine was still La Dame Sorcière. So all of the white threads that she was seeing would have been kind of tainted almost by Morgaine. And so I think that's part of the reason that that's happening, because the power that I guess like the gods are like testing her with, or that she's being kind of introduced to, isn't quite free of Morgaine yet. And Morgaine's the evil one, which we find out because in book 3, she's still a bitch. She's still the worst, but she no longer has that magic. Lou does. And when Lou gets it in this book, it feels like she describes it so beautifully. Like it feels like she just is things. Yeah. But there's this quote that Nicolina has at the very beginning of part 2, when they've still got Lou, but I think we found out that it's actually Nicolina. Let's see here. We can only obey, even if something is wrong, even if below the gold magic a newfound presence lingers, a newfound presence waits. I do not like it. I cannot use it. Unknown to the mouse, it coils like a snake preparing to strike, to protect. It is a gift and it frightens us. We cannot be frightened. And so we know that at this point, Lou has the power, even though Lou doesn't know it yet, because her mom's lost it.
Do you think Nicolina has recognized it in her?
Yes.
Because that's her consciousness talking.
That's the newfound presence that lingers underneath the gold magic. And so La Dame Sorcière's magic is just like waiting for Lou to be ready to fight it.
So like Nicolina's thinking she's going to be like able to harness that? Do you think?
No, I don't. She seems scared of it. Right. It sounds like she can already actually access the gold magic. So she can access Lou's usual golden threads. But she's actually scared of... She says the presence is like waiting. The entire tone shifts when she talks about the white threads. And so I just love that because what we see now is that the power that like that sheer amount of power wasn't corrupting Lou.
Yeah.
That power is comforting, it's protecting, it's preparing to strike in order to help Lou overcome Nicolina.
And you're very happy about that.
I am because I,
Because you were really worried that the magic was like demonized and.
yeah, because we were only getting like
Mm-hmm.
very evil representations of it, and it was frustrating. It's
Yeah.
like I love magic that's just happy,
Good
protective.
magic. Good magic.
Yeah, where the fuck is Glinda?
Yeah, where's the rainbows and the unicorns?
Yeah. Um, I think it also speaks to how old and how powerful La Dame Sorciere's magic is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because Nicolina is old as dirt.
Yes.
In her flashback, Lou, like when they have that whole flashback bit, Lou was
Mm-hmm.
like, I kind of recognize these mountains, but they look different from when
Yeah.
I remember playing under them, which means Nicolina's like super old.
Yeah. Segueing into that scene, because I just made a connection, and I think this is why it's important to listen to the episode before, because I'm like, connections.
Yes.
The last episode, we were talking a lot about Lou's lack of self-awareness and the fact that she can't see past her own insecurities to like deal with what's actually going on with like her and Reid and in their relationship. And this is like, it's such a learning and healing moment for her because so she is in this old place. She sees Nicola was her name, and she's young and she has a son, Matthew, and Matthew asks her to like sing to him, and they sing and they have this like really lovely moment. And as they're watching, so like Lou looks at Nicolina and is like, her face softens as she remembers like what's going on. And Lou says she had once been beautiful, not just of face and form, but also of spirit. But beauty faded with time, and Nicolina had lived too long. And just realizing that she had a son that was like taken away from her, that died. Everyone she knew died, and so that's kind of what started the descent of Nicola to Nicolina. And so this is what was happening with Lou, essentially. Lou had a rough start in life, you know?
Yeah.
She's been surviving, she's been running, but this is a clear example of empathy forging a way out of grief and desperation, because that's what Reid needed in the last book, was empathy, right?
Yeah.
And now she's learning, oh, there's like this other side, and so she's feeling humbled and expanded. And it's like sometimes you have to just get out of your own head, which is what she's been in for so long. And like yes, she has like sacrificed herself for like people like in the moment and stuff, and she will do what she has to do to like save the people she loves. But she also needs to understand where they're coming from. And anyways, I thought that was such a brilliant, Nicolina is like this brilliant foil to what like living in complete fear of death is also, because now Lou's recklessness can account for like having to go down that path. Like Lou was ready to go where Nicolina is. Maybe it was a bit of an extreme like example, Nicolina, but that is where like Lou was headed. And so then I want to make the argument that Reid and Ansel are new blood that come into Lou's life, and their perspective like rubs off on Lou. So Reid has this like moral conscience, and it justifies Lou's need to fight for her life because he's like, this is wrong. Whereas Lou is just kind of like, I'm running because I don't want to die. Whereas now she's like, I'm running because this is wrong and this is not how you should use magic. And Ansel has just kind of this like lovely, lighthearted, you know, innocent, inquisitive nature that keeps them like together looking forward.
Ansel's the person, like he exemplifies what they're fighting for.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
It also, you can't look past the fact that when they're in these flashbacks, these like mind space inception fighting rings, that it's Ansel teaching Lou not to fear death that helps her get out of there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why it's so important that Ansel shows up at that moment.
Yeah.
He replaces that path that Lou was going down.
Yeah. And plus, he says that line where he's like, you've been living too afraid. And she says, I've used fear to survive. And he says, no, you're not living. Something along those lines.
Yes, yes.
And then looking back at the things that he did along the way, he's the one who supported a witch while he was in the tower. He's the one who convinced Reid to run off and help them save her. He's the one who followed her into the tunnels. And so he's constantly, even though he's not the strongest and he doesn't have magic, and so he's definitely working at a deficit to the others, he's the one who's living more fearlessly than they are.
He's the spirit.
Yeah.
This was like the moment we had been all waiting for in Blood and Honey that never really came.
Yeah.
And so it came. It was like one of the first things she checks off. Lou needs to get her shit together.
Confront some of her previous actions.
Yeah.
I think during those like 3 or 4 chapters, the part where I cried the most though is when they're sitting in Lou's like paradise, and Ansel just looks at her and he says, "I'm okay, Lou." And I just closed the book and I had to stop for a second, because yes, she needed to see, like, as much as she was like letting Ansel's death fuel some of her self-pity, having to look down at his body, like that's you have to look down at your actions kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is, and I feel like we kind of talked about this yesterday, she gets so self-pitying that she just makes it all about her. She's not paying attention to the fact that Ansel's sitting right in front of her and he's okay. He's like, yeah, death happened, but it's not an ending. I'm continuing in a different way. Like, get out of your own ass for a second and just look at me and look at how okay I am.
Yeah, it was really, and this may or may not account for the fact that I was a little high when I read this part. So, like, the inception of them just, like, fighting and whirling down into these different scenes was quite the experience. But there was a moment when I thought, like, I believed Lou, that she just was going to succumb to death. That she was just going to be like, I'll just die. Like, it was probably the only moment in any book where I thought that was the answer. Was that they would die. Because you know in every book you read, especially like fantasy, whatever, it's like, you know they're never going to kill the main character. Like, this is not Game of Thrones, you know? And there are happy endings, right? But this was the first time I've ever felt like, I don't know, maybe that is the answer. Like I was just like there with her, and it was like not good. But then she says, Ansel deserved better. He deserved more than my self-pity. And then you're like, okay. And then you like come back, and she needed to realize that. And that's like the last straw that broke the camel's back of like her being like, I have to fight for my life. For those that I love, because of what they're doing, what I'm doing, what we're standing for. And Ansel is the example of that, of what they're standing for.
He quite literally stands in the way of Nicolina.
Yeah.
And fearlessly, like in death, he has found the strength that he so desperately wanted in life. And so not that like she needs to feel happy about Ansel's death, but she doesn't have to blame herself for like his life ending.
Yes. Whew. Yes. So that was like the ending of a book.
Book 1.
Yeah, book 1. And then they come out, and like, I think it's Reid's point of view when he realized it's her. You know, she like wakes up, and it's like, oh, we did forget the part where he throws Nicolina Lou's body into the low melancholique, and he says like, he goes, we finish this now, Nicolina. Get the hell out of my wife. And then he just chucks her in, and it's like,
she fucking deserves it.
I know.
But I found it so visually pleasing to just imagine him, because he's like close to like 7 feet tall, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And
he's
just
a big guy.
She's got to be at least 5 feet off the floor or off the ground, just thrown into this water. Such a great image.
Yeah. So then I think that's like the only real moment too when we like see Morgaine like stand off. Every other place, she's kind of sneaking in the shadows. She comes up with like all of the Dames Blanches and the Dames Rouges.
Yeah, because Isla and Angelica would definitely fuck them up.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about a couple of character things leading up to this point, though.
Yes, go ahead.
So, first of all, Saley. I recently found out that we said her name wrong every other previous time, and so I'm going to do my best to call her her real name from here on out, but please do not hold me to it.
Or me.
So Saley showed up at the very beginning when they were in the church that Father Achille was parsonage of. And at first I was really annoyed because I feel like I didn't really keep it that secret, but I was really annoyed by Saley in the first two books. And it's not by anything she did. I get annoyed by that damsel character really easily. And so I was thinking, like, this is the last thing that they need. They already don't really have Lou on their side at the moment. Coco is distraught because she's this love triangle between her, Ansel, and Beau has really it's gone a completely different way than any of us could have anticipated. And so they're dealing with that. And then Saley just shows up out of nowhere. She doesn't have a carriage. She's just stolen this huge bag of shit from her parents. And so at first I was very, very frustrated with the fact that she was about to join their group. However, she really turned it around. And I would argue that after Ansel's death, they desperately needed her energy within the group.
No, yeah, she was a good balance. And I'm kind of glad she's not a big enough character for them to be like, and this is why she's like all strong now, you know. It's like she just shows up and she's exactly what everyone needs. And it's like so nice. And
it also makes sense. Like her development throughout the book wasn't unfounded. Like she gets mad at them several times because she's like, were you locked up in your own sister's tomb while her body decayed next to you? No, I was.
Yeah, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, like, I really, really gained respect for her. And Ansel was this character where he exemplified the spirit, right? He exemplified what they're fighting for. And Saley did that on more than one occasion, very explicitly, too. She's the one who convinces them to try a true love's kiss on Reid.
Yeah.
She's the one who gets mad at Jean-Luc and says, you don't fight the occult, you fight evil.
Yeah.
She consistently reminds them why they're there.
She's the new Ansel. Yep. She's the one that's like, when they're in the chateau and it's snowing, and she's like feeling it on their fingers, and like Reid and Jean-Luc are like watching her, and she's like, it's so beautiful. And then Jean-Luc's like, it's not, it's bad. It's magic. And she's like, can't it be both?
Yeah.
And then the passage says like, and then we all thought, can't she be both?
Yep. But yeah, they desperately needed that lightheartedness because, like we kind of dropped before, is hope was like a big overarching theme throughout this book. They keep getting it, but in the past where they have actually sought it out, where they've been like, yeah, we can do this. We're gonna fly by the seat of our pants the entire time, and it'll go well. This time they've kind of had their asses handed to them, and so they're all mopey, which is fair. But Saley needed to come in there and show them why they had to do the shit that they had to do.
So, immediately on the beach, though, Morgaine and her bitches come. And Reid pulls a new one. Decides to be real witchy. He's like holding Lou. And they're like in the water and the waves are like crashing around them, right? And then he's searching for threads and like trying to figure out a solution. And then he just shouts, I'll find you.
Yeah.
And then he's out. And then she has this, 300-pound man to like try and get through the water. I was like, nice one, Reid. Like, just kind of leave her. You could have done it
like slightly closer, like at least go to where your feet touch.
Yeah.
The thing about that is that that thread he mentions earlier, we don't know what it is.
Oh, yeah.
But he had definitely seen the thread earlier. And so one thing that it's kind of come up a couple of times while discussing these books is how prominent I guess, fate is within this universe.
Yeah.
And so I think it does beg the question of if this thread was showing up earlier, before Lou was freed, then in order for their plan to all work, in order for them to defeat Morgaine and bring peace to the land, he had to do this thread.
Mm.
And so I where we see stress, whatever triple goddess or Isla or Claude, whoever's orchestrating all of this, or even if it's something larger than them, he had to do that. And so what that leads to is Reid and Lou getting to fall in love honestly.
Yes. Yes. That was one of the first things I really noticed. I was like, Mahurin is giving Reid a chance to fall in love with Lou as a witch.
Mm-hmm.
She's giving us all the do-over of that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel redundant, and it doesn't feel like we've been here before. It feels completely new. A lot is at stake. Reid is like wanting to murder her. Like it's pretty
Fucked up.
yeah,
It feels really enemies to lovers.
oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
The first time around, I'm like, is it though? Because he doesn't know that they're really enemies.
Yeah.
But this time around, he goes in and he's like, I'm gonna kill her.
Yeah. So,
But then
before yeah.
no, go, because I'm gonna start talking about sex.
Before we get into that, we need to talk about like melazines and stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. So let's do that. I'll let you head that up.
Okay, so first of all, if you are a follower of our Instagram, then you'll know that we both have a fear of the ocean. When I was reading this, every time Mahurin said that the water was like dark, it wasn't. I think she was lying, and in my head, it was very clear and perfect water.
And you could see everything.
You could see
from
everything.
miles away.
There was no hidden threats. There was no random eyes opening because you could see the body it was attached to,
Yes.
and everything was safe.
Yes.
I really like the way that she designed them, like within the story. I like that they're really ostentatious. It felt kind of almost like drag.
Otherworldly.
Like,
yeah.
yeah, you're like exaggerating these mores and these styles to the point where they lose meaning.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. Like the salted sea lettuce.
Yeah.
It becomes yesterday's jam, yet like so like quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's the society, the etiquette, politeness, or whatever is just so untruthful in the waters of truth. It's a great like dichotomy.
Yes, I loved what she did with that. I loved that you had some of the melazines were walking around naked with like a fancy necklace on, and others were in full gowns, and they called it their treasures because it was things that they'd stolen from ships that they'd sank. Ships that were stupid enough to roam through their waters. So
I also
like them.
This gave me like the hint, Miss like romance novel reader, that things are going to start getting steamy, because it was this moment where someone was wearing, and it was just like they were just like more, they were all like half naked and stuff. Bo and everyone is just kind of like, what's going on? And then there's this exchange between like Coco and Lou and one of the melazines. I can't remember her name because they all have like really fun names. And she was just like really assertive and like really proud of like her body and her sexuality. And they just both looked at each other and were like, I like her. Like it was just like this very like, oh, things are shifting. Like things are like getting into that kind of territory of like, why would we include that? You know, It was kind of interesting. And then, and then you have like these like naked men with like rubies in their nipples. It's just like so like detailed.
There's also this line where, let me find it. Okay, I think this is the one. So, oh God, I'm going to butcher the name. Eglantine.
Yep.
Says to Coco, she's like, you've always been beautiful, but I must say your breasts are an exquisite addition. Because they're all honest.
Yeah.
And so she's almost like subverting what we would consider to be mannerly by taking it too far and talking about her boobs. Like you would never talk about that in polite society.
Yeah. She does it so confidently that it would be like rude not to like take it for what it is.
Exactly. she's just like complimenting this girl she's watched grow up, and she's like, "Your boobs are amazing." And I love that. I love how absurd they are.
Yeah, yeah,
Because we get the line later from Bo where he's like, "She was twisting my words. I think
yeah,
you're extraordinary." And so we know that like even though it's truthful waters, there's still what is it? There's the chapter that's called Lie of Omission,
yeah,
which I guess can get through, and that's why Saley is really good at
yeah,
looking good to them.
yeah.
Minor detail, I really didn't like how much they brought up how much mildew was like in the
I didn't.
area.
Okay, yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
I feel like I
Everything
could
was
smell
wet.
it.
Everything was like
I was like, my
spongy.
asthma's acting up just reading about it.
And it was interesting because the way it was described was like, oh, and the curtains were all like used to be like ripped and now they've like sewn it in with seaweed, and I'm like, that sounds disgusting and weird.
Or like the like the fainting couch where it was like it looked like it was red at some point, but now it was just gray, and I'm like, that's fucking disgusting.
I was like, but like she wasn't saying it was disgusting. And I was just like, what's going
I
on?
can draw my own conclusions.
Yeah, it was so weird. I think it's more of an example of the people. Like
No,
we're
that's fair.
supposed to, because it was before we went to the dinner, so we didn't really know who Isla was.
Yeah.
She could have been like this really cool like ally. She ended up being like a butt.
Yeah.
And so I think we were supposed to be feeling a little on edge,
Yeah.
and not
No.
get our hopes up too much, and I think that was like a really brilliant way of doing that.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, so they arrive at this castle, and immediately everyone loves Saley because she
Hmm.
knows how to perform in polite society. She's a classic aristocrat. I'm glad that I already brought up Saley already because this is the part of the book where she moves from being this kind of fifth wheel, this tag along, to being a good friend to Lou and
Yeah.
Coco.
Yeah, it's very intimate when they're like brushing each other's hair and
Yep.
yeah.
So she kind of sneaks her way into Lou and Coco's room, which none of them end up staying there at the castle overnight like they planned to.
Mhm.
So the room is really just for this cute little scene, which I appreciate. I'm down for it. But basically, Coco's all distraught because everyone just got to see her family trauma.
Yeah.
And Lou is still frustrated over the fact that she just got her body back and now she's lost Reid.
Yeah.
And so, as girls do, everyone sits and they start doing each other's hair
Yeah.
to kind of calm. Like it's nice, they're brushing each other's hair, they're
Yeah.
braiding, the tender touches of somebody you trust. Saley says some really emotional shit. She talks about her mom not really being there for her and her sister when she was younger. Her sister's the one who taught her how to pick locks, and so we find this other side of Saley that wasn't really there before. You can really feel the loneliness that she's felt since her sister died. So we've got the trauma already of her being in the casket with her sister in the tomb, but then also the fact that her sister was pretty much her only friend growing up. And so when she lost her sister, she lost her only emotional support. And so there's that unsaid, and like Lou kind of comments on that like in her mind, like in her narration, where she's like she could see how much Saley just wanted companionship.
Mhm.
And other than the fact that she was dating Saley's ex, there was no reason for them to be enemies. And so then she goes over there and she starts playing with Saley's hair,
Yeah.
which before only her sister had ever done. And I thought that was like such a sweet turning point for them
Mhm.
because, like we said, Saley had to fill that role of what are we
Yeah.
fighting for
Yeah.
outside of ourselves. And so when Lou did that, she recognized that in Saley.
Yeah, that was a really loaded sweet scene.
Yeah. So after that very sweet fan service scene that I've definitely read too much into, they go to dinner where they're supposed to meet Isla, and the goal is to get Isla as an ally against Morgaine because they want to get the Melazines on their side. But Isla ends up not being that responsive. She kind of tricks Bo and sounding like he doesn't really support Lou, but with the intent of like frustrating Lou. And this is where we find out actually that Lou has the white threads now. She is La Dame Sorcière. because she gets really frustrated and she like stands up and she starts defending herself. And in the midst of doing that, turns into the maiden. And it's only then that Isla decides to possibly support them. So not fully helping yet. But again, like, how could you have believed these like quote unquote truths that Bo is half getting out when you also just revealed that you have your mother's power now?
That you are extraordinary. Yeah.
Other goddesses have decided they've deemed you worthy.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much where we go there.
Yeah.
It was all for naught, mostly, because then she puts them on the quest to get Angelica's ring back, because the ring is what holds her magic, I guess.
Yeah. But it's like there's nothing better in like a adventure when you're like, everyone's had a bath.
Yeah. Now that we all smell human again.
And then you got like your backpack with like extra clothes and food, salted sea lettuce.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like walking out of this gross mildewy city. I was like, that was a good scene for me. Just like, yeah. I was like, oh, okay, let's go. And I love the imagery of just knowing that like Reid is just floating.
Yeah.
He's just, he's just like, his arms are limp and he's his like arms are limp and he's just floating because he's like unconscious, but he's just like floating next to everyone. That's just funny. It was just really funny to me as well.
And then remembering that he's like close to like 7 feet tall.
Yeah, he's just like this.
So he just like passes through. You see, you can't actually see his head and his feet at the same time. He's so long that they actually like it goes past the lines of vision.
I don't know why it's funny to me. I mean, I was kind of assuming he was like upright and is like.
Oh, I was assuming he was like horizontal.
Oh, really? Because
yeah,
in my mind, I was just like, he's just like, you know,
I don't even know which
like,
one's better. They're both
they're both
so stupid.
They're both so
not
stupid.
Like that's not like a comment on the situation. Just like he looks so stupid.
I know, that's why I'm laughing. Like it's just like, oh yeah, but then like no one's commenting on the fact that Reid looks so ridiculous right now. Like I don't know why.
He just looked like fucking Sleeping Beauty or something.
I kind of imagine like fairy dust just kind of sparkling around him and he's got like rosy cheeks and he's just so helpless.
Little like
helpless boy.
A veil of roses and he's holding flowers.
Yeah, or like little birds are like holding him up by his clothes.
Oh God. Okay, so
I'm getting giggly now.
You're good.
Okay. Yeah, so we get back to the beach.
He's still passed out though. And so like I said, Sally's the one who suggests true love's kiss. And everyone kind of laughs at her for a second. And then she's like, well, do any of you have any other ideas? Yeah. And they're like, well, I guess not. And so I love that now Sally's actually starting to hold her own against them. She's learned their ways.
Yeah, she feels comfortable enough to like have input, you know?
Yeah, there's this line early on where she's still kind of getting to know them and in a very polite way tells Bo that he's a dick.
Yeah.
And she starts it where she's like, please don't take any offense to this, Your Highness. But I was like, fuck.
Yeah, I do remember really that, knows.
Yeah. She's really learning how to keep up with them.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to insult Bo. And
yeah, exactly. That's the dynamic that's been established.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. So this is a fun scene. So Sally convinces them true love's kiss. And there's this moment when like they're like, okay, I guess we'll try it. And then Lou like kisses him and is like, oh, I missed him. And I was just like, I felt that in my bones. I was just like, I know what that feels like. Oh, I miss him. Oh yeah. Coming home, you know?
Yeah.
And then he fucking wakes up and wants to kill her. And it's like, what?
The slow realization of what was happening, like realizing before she realized, was
It
rough,
was
to say the
it was
least.
awful. It was heart-wrenching. I remember being at work being like, "No!" and then messaging you and you're like, "That's where I'm at." I had to put it down. You're like, "I can't read. I
Yeah.
can't go on." But it's actually a pretty good scene. This has been Lou's greatest fear all in book 1 was that he's going to find out she's a witch. Now he only sees her as a witch, right? It's like literally flipped.
Yep.
And so now she's just like, oh, she's just so heartbroken. And she's like, he hates me. I mean, it takes him a while to kind of realize he's not joking, even though that's like not what Reid would do. Reid is not a joker. They just didn't want to believe it. And so like Reid's like going after her and like has her in like a hold of some kind. And it's so funny because Bo and Celie are to Reid, right? Are like the only redeemable people in this group. Like everyone else is a witch.
Yeah.
They need to like die. Why are you mingling with them? And he's like, oh, Celie, oh, your highness, you know? And he's just like, what are you doing here? And then Lou tries to get like close to him to like convince him, and so then he goes after her, gets her in like some kind of chokehold or something, and then Bo is like realizes he still has power to Reid because he's the prince.
He's like, oh yeah.
He's like, oh, and he goes, stop this now! I command it as your crown prince. He finished lamely. Like it was just like a very like, oh, I just remember laughing so hard. It was such a Bo moment. And it was like, yeah.
Like, all Reid did was forget Lou. And so he still remembers that Bo's his brother.
Yes.
And so he's like, I know I don't have to follow you because you're my shitty older brother.
Right. Like, he's like, he finished lamely, so it wasn't like very authoritative or anything. He didn't wield much power. Yeah, and so and at this point, we're not really sure exactly what he remembers, what he doesn't remember specifically.
Yeah.
We know that he's not registering who Lou is.
Okay, so this episode ended up being very long. So Bethany and I, with, of course, our sweet followers' consent, decided to cut this one into 2 parts.
Yes. So this was a good segue moment into the next pretty much half of the episode where we talk a little bit more about sex and juicier topics and kind of the falling action. So until next week, when that comes out, you can find us on Instagram at In Bed with Books Pod. We'll see you next week. Happy reading.
Happy reading.
Bye.
Bye.
It's not like I said, it's not about explicitity, you know. Stop. Shut up.